My life was crashing down, and Mr. Sterling was my last hope. He offered to take my legal case pro bono, but he warned me that the settlement would be deeply personal. Locked in his opulent office, high above the city, he showed me that when you're desperate, the price of freedom can be found in the most forbidden places. Now, my legal troubles are gone, but I've signed a new contract. That means I belong to him. My life was falling apart. Eviction notices, unpaid bills, an illegal letter that threatened to take everything I had. I was referred to Mr. Sterling, a shock of a lawyer in a city skyscraper, known for his ruthless tactics and his impenetrable reputation. When I walked into his opulent office, all dark wood, leather, and panoramic city views, I felt smaller than ever. My future was in his hands. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his tailored suit perfectly pressed, his gaze piercing. "So, Miss Davies," he said, his voice deep and calm, "you seem to be in quite a bit of trouble." I laid out my case, my voice trembling, trying to explain the mess I was in. He just listened, his eyes never leaving mine, making me feel exposed and utterly vulnerable. Dear listeners, before I began telling this complicated story of my life, I ask you to support my channel, subscribe, leave a like and write the comment with city you are listening from. This is very important for us. And now, enjoy listening. He leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. Your case is complex and expensive, but I believe we can find a unique solution. He stood up and walked to the door, not to open it, but to hit the heavy security lock. The click echoed in the silent office. "No interruptions," he murmured, turning back to me. "For a consultation this sensitive, we need absolute privacy." My heart pounded. This wasn't standard legal procedure. This was something else entirely. He walked around his desk, stopping inches from my chair. "Most clients pay me with money, Miss Davies. You, however, don't seem to have much of that." He gestured toward my threadbare coat, a subtle insult that burned. "But you possess other assets. Assets that could be far more valuable to me than a check." He explained the terms. He would take my case he would make all my problems disappear, but the payment would be personal, confidential, and would begin right here, right now. I tried to argue, to find a loophole, but his gaze was unyielding. He had all the power, and I had nothing left to lose. He sat back down behind his desk, not looking at me, but at the stack of legal papers. "The clock is ticking, Miss Davies. If you want this settlement, you need to show me your commitment, and the best place to start is under my desk." My breath caught in my throat. I looked at the heavy mahogany, at the polished leather of his expensive shoes. I thought of my eviction notice. I thought of my empty bank account. The city sprawled below us, oblivious to the choice I was about to make. With trembling hands, I reached for the hem of my dress. Under the desk, the world outside the legal papers, the city, my troubles all melted away. All that existed was his silent command, and my desperate need for salvation. The narrator should describe the sensory details. The coldness of the polished wood, the smell of his expensive cologne, and the terrifying intimacy of the forbidden act. Every time he shifted in his chair, every time he let out a low growl, I knew he was gauging my performance. I was no longer a client. I was a pawn in his private game, a negotiation tool in my own case. He didn't just want a payment. He wanted my complete submission, making me realize that the settlement was far more encompassing than I could have ever imagined. By the time my legs ached and my voice was raw, I knew I had earned my pro bono service. He leaned forward, hitting a button on his intercom. "Bring in the dismissal papers," he commanded, his voice perfectly calm, as if nothing had happened. I stumbled out from under the desk, my dress disheveled, my body trembling, but my legal problems were solved. He pushed a thick stack of papers across the desk. "All dismissed. Consider this case closed, Miss Davies," he said, handing me a pen. "But remember, our arrangement is just beginning. Every consultation will be strictly confidential, and the payment will be ongoing." The story ends with me walking out of his office, the security lock clicking open with a final, echoing sound. As I stepped back into the busy hallway, I felt the weight of the city again. But it was different now. I was free of my old troubles, but I had entered a new, far more dangerous contract. I looked back at his closed office door, knowing I would be back. Because when your freedom comes with a price, you always have to pay. A week had passed since that afternoon in his office. My legal troubles were officially dismissed, but my mind was still trapped under that mahogany desk. My phone buzzed at 6 p.m. on a Friday. No text, just an address and a command. Grand Ballroom, 8 p.m. Dress provided. Don't be late. A courier arrived minutes later, with a box containing a backless silk dress that costs more than my old car. I realized then that the pro bono deal wasn't a one-time payment. It was a subscription. I was his +1, but I knew I wasn't there for the champagne. The gala was a sea of power judges, politicians, and the city's elite. Mr. Sterling found me at the entrance. He didn't greet me like a client. He placed a firm hand on the small of my back, his fingers touching the bare skin, where the dress dipped low. Yuruku. Compliance. "Miss Davies," he whispered, his voice cutting through the classical music. "Tonight, we're celebrating our victory. But remember, in a room full of lawmakers, you are the only one who has to follow my rules." The evening was a torture of politeness. I had to stand by his side as he shook hands with the district attorney and laughed with Supreme Court justices. Every time he spoke, his hand would tighten on my waist, a silent reminder of what he could do to my life if I tripped up. "The air is a bit thin in here, don't you think?" he asked, though it wasn't a question. He led me toward the heavy velvet curtains that opened onto a secluded stone balcony overlooking the city. The noise of the party became a muffled hum. He pinned me against the cold stone railing. Below us, the city lights shimmered. Behind us, the silhouettes of the elite moved against the curtains. "You think you're safe because there are people 10 feet away?" he growled, his hand sliding up the silk of my thigh. "I want to see if you can stay silent while the world watches. Consider this a reevaluation of our contract." He didn't care about the risk. He thrived on it. I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out as he reminded me exactly who owned my freedom. On that balcony, the power dynamic reached a fever pitch. I was terrified of a waiter walking out, or a judge stepping out for a cigar, but Mr. Sterling's intensity made it impossible to pull away. The narrator should describe the sensory contrast: the freezing night air versus the heat of his touch, the rough stone of the railing versus the delicate silk of the dress. I had to maintain a mask of composure every time someone laughed on the other side of the velvet. He was testing my ability to be his silent partner. Every movement was a lesson in his control over me, and my control over my own voice. By the time he straightened his tie and smoothed my hair, I was trembling, my pulse racing faster than it ever had in a courtroom. We walked back into the ballroom as if nothing had happened. He handed me a glass of vintage wine, his expression as cold and professional as a closing argument. "You performed admirably, Miss Davies," he said, toasting me. As the night ended, he walked me to my car. He didn't say goodbye. He just handed me a small, leather-bound planner. Inside, every Tuesday, for the next 6 months, was marked with a time and an office room number. Our next consultation will involve a deeper dive into the fine print, he said, closing the car door for me. The story ends with me watching him walk back into the gala, the most powerful man in the room. I looked at the planner, then at my reflection in the window. I wasn't the same girl who walked into his office a week ago. I was a pro bono acid na. And as I drove away, I realized the most terrifying part. I wasn't just following his rules anymore. I was starting to like them.